Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio with your hosts Irene and Mark and Mark Johnson.
Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio, the flagship show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. I'm your host, Irene Allen Block, and here with me today is my co-host, Mark Johnson.
Hello. So,
how many times?
Well, hey, it worked. You can't complain.
Oh.
So, how was your holiday? You a lot over there have a holiday weekend the same as us here.
Bank holiday. Yeah, bank holiday. Shopping.
Yeah.
No. Bank holiday was Monday, wasn't it?
Yes. It was a 3-day weekend, just like it is over here.
That's right. I didn't have a bank holiday Monday because you had a bank holiday Monday and spent most of the day talking to me on the computer.
So you're claiming that me talking with you takes away a whole holiday from you?
Well, yeah, it was just a everyday, same day type thing. You know?
Well, that can certainly be remedied.
I went, Mark, the weekend was different because I went out and I bought 2 new sofas and an armchair and a puff.
A puff?
A puff.
I know places where you can get those.
A puff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one of those things you put your feet on.
Oh, an ottoman.
No.
Yes.
An ottoman?
It's called
an ottoman. It's what you put your blankets in.
Yeah, and you can put your feet up on it. Yes.
Yeah, but that goes at the end of your bed, Mark.
No. Is that what...
This is a puff.
Oh. Well, thank you
It's a puff.
Thank you for clarifying that for me and everybody else.
Well, yeah. It's like an ottoman to me is like a blanket basket, although we don't use blankets anymore, and it goes at the end of the bed. A puff, it's puff. You put it in the middle of the floor, wherever you're sitting, and you put your feet on it, and it's usually matching the furniture.
Oh, well, there we go.
And puffs over here cost quite a lot of money.
We still call them ottomans over here.
Well, they're quite expensive over here. It costs nearly as much as the armchair itself. And the armchair, this is what I can't make out. You know, you've got a 2-seater sofa or a 3-seater sofa and a 4-seater sofa. The 4-seater sofa is cheaper than the 2-seater or the 3-seater.
Yeah.
By about £100. And then you've got a single armchair that costs you the same money as a 2-seater or a 3-seater. So it's more expensive than the 4-seater sofa.
Huh. Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. I don't get it, but I understand it. Kind of.
Yeah, okay.
So,
right.
Well, before we get in with our guest, I wanted to mention I wanted to bring up again that thing we were talking about before we came on the air, the little experience you just had.
Okay, people, stay with me now because this is to do with shopping. I order my shopping online, my grocery shopping every week and the dog food, and it arrived this afternoon. Some of the grocery shopping was in carrier bags, plastic carrier bags, and I got to the last unpacking the last plastic carrier bag, and I thought there was something inside, so I turned it upside down. Good job too, it wasn't eggs or anything. I just turned the bag upside down, and the only thing that fell out was a receipt. But something else seemed to fall out, and well, I don't know whether it fell out the bag, but it hit the floor at the same time as the receipt. But it hit the floor 2 foot away from the bag. And if it had fallen out of the bag, surely it would have landed underneath the bag like the receipt did. Do you understand what I'm saying, Mark?
Yes, I capiche.
Okay, now this thing, 2 foot away from where the receipt landed, looked like a rolled up cigarette. I didn't have my glasses on, but it was white and it was that shape. So I went over to pick it up thinking, oh my God, how did this get in here? And as I put my fingers on it, I felt it and it disappeared under my fingers. Just vanished.
It just vanished into thin air.
Vanished into thin air.
So
I turned around, looked all around me on the floor to see whether it somehow moved somewhere else, but it hadn't. It vanished.
now it couldn't have been one of your ghosts, Herbert, or the other ones
No.
messing with you.
No, the impression I got when I started to think about it was something like a time traveler standing in the corner, slightly off dimension, watching what I was doing, packing away with the shopping, which is always interesting to everybody when I do shopping. And maybe he dropped something. It came through that dimensional atmosphere straight down onto my floor, and he picked it up quick.
So maybe he dropped it by accident. You saw it too late.
I felt it, Mark. I put my fingers over it like you would if you if you dropped a cigarette on the floor, you'd put your fingers over the top, your forefinger and thumb to pick it up, wouldn't you? And I'd done that. I felt it, but it disappeared.
So it disappeared in your hand while you were touching
I
it.
didn't even get it off the floor.
You
touched
reached
it.
down.
I was just about to pick it up, and then it just disappeared. So I didn't even get it a centimeter off the floor. Not even nowhere near.
Huh. Now that is really strange.
It is strange. And not only that, but then later on in the afternoon, I was playing with one of these pulley things with Gertie, the bulldog.
Gertie, the official mascot of the Paranormal UK radio network.
Yes. And she was pulling one end of it and I was pulling the other end, and all of a sudden she stopped, turned around, spun around as if something had touched her on the bottom, hesitated, and then turned back to the toy again and started pulling it. We carried on pulling it, and then suddenly she done the same actions again. She spun around as if someone had touched her. She couldn't see who they were. And then turned back to me. I thought, well, that's strange. It's like someone invisible was just tapping her on the backside. And then after that, Gertie, a bit later on in the afternoon, Gertie and my Jack Russell and I settled down in an armchair to have a snooze. And I just sat down, and it was on the other end of the office. I just sat down and I heard something. I didn't see anything. I had my eyes shut. I was just about to, try and go to sleep. And I heard something pick up in this end of the office where the computers all are, and then be placed back down on the desk. Like someone had moved something. So I don't know. I don't know what it is. Maybe I've got some sort of time traveler wafting through. I don't know. That's rather curious about my intelligence. I don't know. Got no idea.
That's really, really strange. Well, that's going to kind of fit in a little bit with what we're going to be talking about tonight. So why don't we go ahead and we'll introduce our guest. We're going to be speaking tonight with Lewis Michael Rhinehart, and he is going to be talking to us about Mars, spirituality, and time anomalies. Lewis has also been he has been a speaker at several UFO conferences. So Lewis, welcome to the program.
Hello, I'm very happy to be here.
Hiya, Lewis. Hello.
Well, we're happy.
Hello.
We're happy to have you here, and I think that where this conversation is going to go tonight is going to be around the same lines of what Irene has just been experiencing. Well,
I experience time travelers all the time, or so it seems.
Yeah, they're always
things which we think are time travelers.
Yeah, that is pretty wild. I mean, it's what I experience kind of in that realm is I've crossed over timelines. I've had timeline shifts, and like something. It was wild, Mark, that you mentioned Mercury being just about out of retrograde, and some odd things happened during that. But the latest was actually this morning when I went to hook up a battery charge one of my batteries, and it was my an older charger that I've actually had for about 50 years that this guy borrowed from me, and he broke it basically. It wouldn't charge anything after that. So now all of a sudden it works again. So because some timelines are extremely close to each other. They're almost touching. They're not touching, but maybe at times they do. So, but I've had a number of those experiences over the past 8 or 9 years.
Well,
timeline shifts.
Well, Lewis, why don't we get into this? If you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself and how you got into researching not only your experiences with timeline shifts, but also your research into Mars too. Just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started and all that.
Sure. Well, I was living in West Virginia. This all happened in 2009 in January, and I had been doing research all day long. It's just my wife and I there, and I was tired of doing the research. I've been all day, literally. So it was nighttime, and so I started looking up child prodigy musicians, because I play guitar and sing. So I was checking them out, and there was a prompt. You know how they do when you're on YouTube, and it said Bariska, the boy from Mars. Well, I thought, well, that's odd. So anyway, I clicked onto it, and it was a Project Camelot interview of him. It was like his first.
Sorry, but Lewis, the little Russian boy.
Exactly, Bariska.
Yeah, I know him.
Exactly.
Mm.
Yeah. So anyway, I was of course very fascinated by that, and then I was prompted again. It said Andrew D. Basiago, the discovery of life on Mars. Now, I'd been a ufologist for the past 40 years, but I simply never thought that Mars was inhabited, or, as a matter of fact, any of the planets in our solar system other than Earth was inhabited. So anyway, I take a look at this, and I try to find his paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars, which he published on 12/12/08. So here it is, the 8th of January, where I'm trying to find the paper. I can't find it, so I email Andy, and he gives me a great response. I mean, just like he is now with people, he's just very kind and considerate. And I know, Mark, that you've interviewed him, and he's just a good person. And so anyhow, I looked at his paper. I actually downloaded it and printed it out and looked at it, and I was just absolutely amazed. And previous to that, in Andy's email, we went back and forth a couple times. He said, well, if you decide to get into this and you want to put something in the group for Mars Anomaly Research Society, please do that. So what I did was, the next thing I did after I read his paper is I downloaded the image PIA 10214, which is actually an image that is it's a spirit rover image, and it's perched. The spirit, when they took this image, it was perched on the edge of the home plate plateau in the inner basin of Columbia Hills range, inside of Gustav crater. So this is the image that has the famous, it went all around the internet. It's the lady on the edge. You can see the woman, she's holding something in her hand, and it looks like it's a statue.
Yes.
It is. So anyway, yeah, are you familiar with that?
Yes, I've seen that
image?
photo.
Okay. So anyway, I went through the entire PIA and found most of what Andy had pointed out, because he actually shows and it tells you in his paper where to find this stuff. But not only did I find that, but I found a couple of other things, including a hovercraft that was occupied. And my wife actually found an example of a Homo martis, which is Mars Man on Mars. Okay, so anyway, I call him the Cape Guy, and you can look at it. I have all of his stuff. Well, not all of the stuff, but many albums on my page that anyone can look at and see the work. Basically, a lot of that was part of my presentation this past conference, Mars conference here in Mobile, Alabama. So anyhow, now I'm convinced. I mean, I'm stunned, but I'm convinced that this man, Andrew D. Basiago, is telling the truth. You know, that he found life on Mars. He spent a full year on that one image. So I began doing some work, and I was connecting with him and Ross Curley, who was also a photo analyst for Andy at the time. And after about 3 months, I found movement. I found an indication of movement, where something was there. And on another day, another soul, it wasn't there. So, and this has been found by others also. So once I found that, then I guess it was about 3 months later, Andy invited me to be a photo analyst for Mars. And so I dove into it big time. I mean, I was absorbed by it. And so whatever I'm finding, I'm sending to him and to Ross, and we're discussing that. We've done joint projects where it's actually the the gremlin that Andy has as the banner on the Mars group page is the striding gremlin, and that was a project that we all worked on, me, Andy, and Ross. That was called Project Treetops. So anyway, I probably spent, I'd guess, a rough estimate, probably 4,000 or more hours just scanning Mars images. So all I would do is I would put up the image, the PIA or an orbiter image, and I'd go on the left side of it, and screen by screen, I'd go all the way up. I'd mag it about 200%. If I came across something that looked interesting, I'd just kind of remember where it was. And then I'd go back to it. When I actually made a find, I would not just instantly believe what I think I'm seeing, because it was so just out there, So I would leave it alone for a couple of days or whatever, and then go back to it and discover that I am seeing what I'm seeing there. I am seeing a face. What the Martians do is they mark their territories by terraforming the area. Like, I have one image that I call the Wizard of Mars, and it looks literally like a wizard. And what's interesting, of course, these are all seen from above, because these are orbiter. That was an orbiter image. It wasn't a rover image. So anyhow, I'm convinced that, to get on with it, I'm convinced that Andy is telling the truth. And then I start getting into his whole time travel and teleportation story. And
before we continue, Lewis,
let
me just, for our listeners who may not be aware of Andrew D. Basiago, you can find him on Facebook. We interviewed Andy on a couple of different occasions. His story is being part of the MK Ultra program, where they had young people back in the 70s and early 80s participating not only in secret government time travel experiments, but teleportation, and then later in the 80s supposedly doing teleportation jumps to Mars. Now, the story sounds completely fantastic, even a bit ludicrous, until you listen to his story. And I'm going to sit here and tell you, it's a compelling story. There's not a lot of physical evidence, and, the jury is out for a lot of people. But I like Andy. I like the story he tells. Let's just say I want to believe it. And hopefully, maybe some more things come to light in the near future that proves him right. But he does claim that Mars is inhabited, that he was there. So, that's Andrew DiBisciago. And Lewis, please go ahead and continue your story.
Okay, well, so anyway, here I am convinced that he told the absolute truth about Mars. So why would this man with multiple degrees, I mean, he has the highest degree of integrity. His story never changes. The only thing that changes is he may add something. He may add something that comes to light through either talking with another or whatever. I know that he retained all of his memories from Project Pegasus. They were not able to block them, but they blocked a large amount of his memories from Mars until William B. Stillings came forward after he did, I think it was the 2011 interview on Coast to Coast. So, and then Stillings called him and, hey, remember me? We were in the Mars Jump Room program together. That's how that went. So I'm like all in with Andy as far as his story. I believe he's telling the absolute truth. And matter of fact, it's might sound a little odd, but I know he is. I just know he is, because first of all, there have been others come forward. I've talked to 3 people personally who have been on the planet. That it would be Andy and William Stillings in length, and William Whitecrow. I had a brief conversation with Bernard Mendez when I was attempting to get him to attend one of the Mars conferences. So I'm 100% convinced. And my other association with Andy is I am supporting him in his presidential campaign. So what I did this for his first run, which was a write-in run, is I was responsible for getting all the information from all the states in the U.S. As far as what it takes to become a write-in candidate. And it is convoluted, to say the least. It is ridiculous. Needs major reform. So anyway, one of the other things that I really keyed in on was the whole time travel and more time anomalies. So that's when I guess 2 or 3 years ago, I asked Andy if it was okay to start TARS, which is Time Anomaly Research Society. And I found it kind of interesting, the movie that came out, what was it called? It was McCulkey. They went to find another planet so Earth was going to die. I don't know if one of you can remember the movie. Interstellar.
Interstellar, yes.
And there was a robot. Yeah. Well, one of the robots, there's 2 robots. One was named Case, and the other one's name was TARS, which I found kind of weird because now, and I came up with the group TARS before the movie came out, So anyway, I've had a lot of participation on that Facebook group, and it's I'm over 3,000 members. I got close to 3,500 members now, and it's all about time slips, missing time, timeline shifts, or combinations of those. You can have a timeline shift and a missing time thing happened at the same time, or you can have a timeline shift that is so quick that I've identified it as a timeline blip. It's just a quick in and out,
So by that
so
you mean
really
I apologize, Lewis, and this Skype has a little bit of a delay.
Go ahead.
So by these time slips, you're talking about another alternate timeline briefly interacting with ours?
No, a time slip is literally you slip back in time, not necessarily a timeline shift, but there can be a combination. So there can be a timeline time slip, but so the time slip is an individual entity from a timeline shift. Now, the first if you'd like to hear it, I can tell you the first timeline shift that I experienced.
Yes, please.
Okay. I was living in Tennessee, and we had 2 dogs that we had to keep in our yard, and we used an electronic fence. So most of it was buried, but the ground in this area of Tennessee was just about solid rock. I mean, it was, so I dug as much as I could into the ground, but at this one point, it was above the ground. And of course, I had to splice a number of pieces of wire. I put it around about 5 acres. And there was a water main break. So they said, well, there were breaks all over the place because there was an unusually cold winter. So they said, well, we'll get to you when we can. Well, we had an alarm in the house that went off if the wire broke. So the alarm goes off. We look outside, and there's the crew out there. They're finishing up. Matter of fact, they're, that rectangular thing they put in it to pound down the ground,
Yes.
to make it all flat again. Yeah. So anyway, they did that, and I can see what happened. The one piece of the line is buried. They buried it. The other piece is laying straight out where it was with copper exposed. So it must have been at a point where I had spliced it, where it broke. So I tell my wife, listen, I've got to go back in and get my knife and tape to fix this. So while she's there with me, though, I wrap my hand around the wire and I pull it out. It was a little tough to get out, but I pull it out and it came up to and matched where the other piece of wire was. So I didn't have to add any wire. So I go back in. My wife and I both go back in, and she didn't need to go back out. So I did with the tape and the knife, and the wire is now buried again. But it's buried in a little bit different spot. It was pretty close to the road. When it was first buried, it was buried probably about maybe 2 feet from the road. Now this time it was about 4 feet from the road. The other piece was still laying where it was. So before I did that, I go back in the house and I'm like, Pat, that's my wife's name. I said, what just happened out there? She said, what do you mean? I said, well, I want you to tell me from start to finish what happened. So she went through the story, and it was exactly how it went down. Well, I said, guess what? The wire's buried again. She said, no way. I'm like, yes, it's buried again. So anyway, I wrap my hand around it this time, and I'm struggling to pull it out. It won't come out. And when it finally does, it breaks. And now it won't reach the other piece, So that was, sometimes line shifts are very, very similar. Like you'll be talking to someone and they have a white shirt on, but on an adjacent timeline, they have a blue shirt on. That's the only difference. There's no other difference, So that was my first one, which was I thought was really wild. Yeah. So again, that was a pretty wild, crazy thing that I thought, because I had never experienced one. I had heard of them, but I'd never experienced one. What do you think? I mean, do you think that is it unusual according to what you both have known?
I'd actually like to hear a little bit from Irene on that, because you've had a couple of your own little slips that we've discussed on previous shows. Something like that happens where it's not like you're going through a time slip, but when things change like that, or even a little bit like what we were talking about in the beginning of the show, 1 minute that thing is there and then it's gone.
Yeah.
Is it something materialize it and take it away, or did it pop in from somewhere else and then go back to where it was? I mean, what do you think?
I've got no idea. I really have not got any idea what happened this afternoon with that cigarette-looking thing. But that's all I can think. It is, it maybe slipped through, I don't know, and then suddenly slipped back out.
But it's similar to what...
The experiences, a lot of the experiences, I told you about the one at Crystal Palace, didn't I? In the house at Crystal Palace.
Remind me of that one.
I was living in this house at Crystal Palace, and it was a boyfriend's home. I was living with his family. A big old massive big old Victorian house in Crystal Palace. And I'd been there for about 6 months. So this particular room that I walked into this day, I'd walked into 150 times or more before. And it was always the same. But this particular day, as I walked into the room, all of a sudden the whole room changed. The decor, the furniture, it was completely different. It'd gone back in time. Although it wasn't very updated in those days when I was living there, but, you know, it had gone back to Victorian times or just after. And with all the old big brown furniture and one thing or another. And it only lasted a few seconds. I don't know why I did it, but I looked down at the floor, I saw my shoes, and I came out of it. Somebody says it's because I actually saw something modern. By looking at my shoes, I saw something modern, which actually shook me out of it.
You know, that reminds me, there was that movie that Christopher Reeve did after Superman back in the early 80s called Somewhere in Time. And the whole concept of going back in time was he had to eliminate anything that was a reminder of modern day, and he was able to will himself back into time, and then he gets thrown out of it at the end when he pulls a modern penny out of his pocket. So it's almost like the same concept. When you saw your modern shoes, it snapped you out of it.
Yeah. Well, I never thought that at the time. Someone suggested that to me, that could have been what happened. So now I can only think it can be. But, you know, it's like another time my son was living in a big old mansion house in South London. And he took me and my husband up into the attic to the servants' quarters. And we were looking around and one thing or another. And just as we were about to leave this particular room up in the attic, they went through the door. And as I went to go through the door, there was a woman standing there. And she was like the head of the household, like the main maid or whatever you called them. Who's over top of the servants. And I looked at her and she looked at me, and I know we saw each other. I know for that split second we saw each other, and I seemed to know everything about her in that split second. Then it was either my husband or my son said, "Are you coming?" And that broke it, and I went out the door. But she was standing there.
Mm-hmm.
But as soon as they spoke, she vanished, and I just walked out the door as if nothing had happened.
You know, and a lot of people would call that, oh, well, you saw a ghost, but I think...
No, I didn't see a ghost.
Yeah, this idea of time slips. Now, what's interesting about Lewis's story is that it's not as if it was a slip in time so much as the cable was buried or was being buried in one spot, and then the next thing you know, it's buried 4 feet over.
And what I want to ask, Lewis, is how did you feel after that? Because this sort of thing has happened to me. What you're explaining is that sort of thing has happened many, many times, but it leaves me shaky. Not shaky, scared shaky as if I'm off tilt sort of thing. If you understand me.
Yeah, I do, but and I'm not quite sure why this is. I think it comes from my general demeanor, and I know certain things. You know, there's quite a few things that I just know, and it didn't bother me at all. It just was like, wow, you know. Of course, I wrote it down. And I've shared it a number of times in the TARS group, and I've got others. And one of the most fascinating cases, and I've read plenty of. I've read so much, it's like, you know, to the point of ad nauseum. You know, it's like, and especially when I was before I started with the Mars thing, you know, reading tons and tons of books on spirituality, mainly focusing on near-death experiences, and tons of books on abduction cases and all of that stuff, so it really didn't freak me out or bother me at all, and I had a couple more of them happen in Tennessee where
but Lewis,
this was a
does it
yeah.
ever make you feel like you're off kilter, sort of thing? That you are
No.
Yeah,
partly
I think what
here
she's
and
asking,
partly there.
are you feeling any physical after effects?
No. What I think is happening is that that was a little after I began the Mars conferences when I was there, and I was focused on positive. I've always been a positive person, optimistic to a fault, but I've always been very lucky. It's just how it is. So it didn't bother me at all. Matter of fact, none of them actually. It didn't make me feel different at all. But what it was telling me, the way I saw it, was that I was moving onto the most positive timeline that I could be on, which I think I am now. I think I am on a positive timeline. That's why many times now people talking about World War III, there's not going to be one. It's just not going to happen. And the World War III is currently going on now. It's a spiritual war, and I don't want to get into this whole story because it's long, but what I've found out over the course of, it started in 2014 to now, so 3 years, and of course 3 years I've found that I am a spiritual warrior, and I don't get messed with by entities, or I only got messed with by one, and it was recent, and it was what I called an imp, and this person just bugging me, just bugging me, not hurting me.
Was it a black thing? Like a black imp?
This was I never actually saw it before until this last time, and it was a kid, an older kid, and I seem to remember he had a checkered shirt on, and he had brilliant red hair that was all curly. So I warned him to not run across my inflatable bed again, and he did, and I grabbed him and took his momentum, and I smashed him into a chest of drawers. So, and it's kind of funny when I look at it because I can see him there groaning. I mean, I heard him really bad, but I instantly woke up, and when I did, I realized, oh my goodness, this thing has been bothering me all these years. So I just gave him a command to leave and never come back. And if you do, I'm going to kill you. Now that sounds harsh, but he's not coming back.
Well, I must be a spiritual warrior as well then, because I'm not frightened of any entities, and they're pretty scared of me.
Yeah.
I know quite a few of us are scared of you too.
You can't be afraid. You can't be afraid because you have
far
more power over them.
Yeah, you're afraid you're lost. That's it.
Yeah.
So this kid had been bothering you all these years, and when you gave him a sort of a dreamlike good hiding, that was the end of him, was it? He went.
That was it. He was gone. So I've been learning a lot about myself. The more you learn about yourself, the better off you are. So lately I've really been learning much about myself, and I had a couple readings done, and both readings, they were shocked because these people didn't know each other. Matter of fact, this one that I got in 2015, she had never met me before, and I walked in I won't get into the whole thing, but anyway, she starts like reading me. She's like, oh, the first thing she says, wow, you've been coming here for a long time. You're an old spirit, right? I'm like, well, how do you know this? So she says, well, I can do readings. I said, really? She says, yeah, they let me do them here. It was a small place of business that didn't do a lot of business. So I got the reading. And so she tells me things about myself that are very accurate, as far as kids and all that kind of stuff. And then she tells me, one of the main things she said, you've got Indian in you, right? I said, yeah, Cherokee. She said, oh yeah, you were in this tribe. She goes, then she shakes her head and she says, no, you were the leader of the tribe. You were the chief. And basically she was telling me people looked up to me, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. Well, there's a girl, a friend of mine on Facebook, her name is Becky Musto, and I'm sure she wouldn't mind me mentioning her name.
Hello, Becky.
She did the first reading. She's really sweet, very sweet, and she did a reading for me a year to a day before that, and she's telling me that she sees me on horses in armor, and everyone wanted to go into battle with me, because I guess I was just a strategist, and I never lost. And she said, and everyone always looked up to you like they do now, which, I'm not, if anything, I'm humble. I know how I am, I'm not pretentious or anything like that. I don't pretend to be something I'm not. I don't, and I certainly don't pretend to know everything.
Yeah, Lewis, can I tell you a story that's always mystified me?
Sure.
Now, I know I wasn't asleep, but this happened. I was in that sort of theta state where you're not asleep, but your mind is going, And I was walking along this dirt track road, and running alongside the road was a kind of railway line, but it was built up on a slope, so it was higher than the road. And as I was walking along the road, a Native American Indian, beautiful looking man, absolutely beautiful, riding a absolutely gorgeous horse, rode past me, then stopped, turned the horse towards the road, and just leapt from the railway line down onto the road in front of me. And I knew to follow this horse. Okay. The second part of the I won't say it's a dream because I know I was awake. So I'm not going to say it was a dream. So the second part of all this, I was walking with like a tribe of Native American Indians. And we were kind of walking, but they were all, as they were walking, they were in the shape of a horseshoe, upside down horseshoe. Well, with the opening at the top. Right? So if you can imagine them all coming round into the shape of a horseshoe and then walking, and I was walking along with all of them, and they were all walking in one direction. And this old Native American Indian next to me turned around and told me that I was one of them and I was one of the elders.
Wow.
And
that is amazing.
Do you remember I told you about that, Mark?
Yeah, I had completely forgotten about that.
Yeah, so had I until now.
But yeah. Now, how long ago did you have that dream?
Oh, Christ, wasn't it about just over a year ago? Last year sometime, beginning of last year, somewhere like that.
And like you
it wasn't a dream.
It wasn't a dream. It's more of a vision.
Like a vision, like I was actually there. I could feel the ground under my feet as I walked.
It's a fascinating vision.
It's a horseshoe shape. Obviously means something. And I can't remember the tribe now because you sent what I'd wrote down to you. You sent it away to somebody, and she came back and said that's such and such a tribe. Navajo, wasn't it? Navajo?
Navajo tribe? Yeah. I remember that now.
Yeah. But the horseshoe obviously means something. The shape of the horseshoe. It was just like
if it's open
up into horseshoe shape.
If it's open at the end and you're moving forward with that open end, like almost like it's scooping things up, moving forward. I don't know. Very intriguing. What do you think of that, Lewis?
I think is extremely interesting and definitely intriguing. It's I don't have an explanation for it other than that it seems you were just doing some work in the astral, and that was just part of it. It was just meant, I think everything that happens in our dreams, most of our dreams I don't believe are dreams at all. I mean,
but it wasn't dreams. This is it. I do know I wasn't dreaming. I just got into bed. And I was laying there, and all of a sudden it all started happening. So these sort of things happen to me all the time, you know.
So it's a type of vision or astral travel where you didn't fall asleep; you just slipped right into an astral state.
Or a remote view type thing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, those things. It happens all the time.
But if anybody
it's happening more frequently now.
Yeah. If anybody out there can understand this, or let me know the significance for a shape of a horseshoe to the Navajo tribe, please contact us.
That would be very interesting to know. I would like to know that.
Info,
you can contact us on Facebook, or where is it, Mark?
Well, at info@paukradio.com.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, getting back to some of Lewis's experiences, though, I mean, you've had what other types of experiences did you have?
Well, I've had other time slips. One of them, or timeline shifts. One that I thought was pretty wild. It freaked me out. I was okay, but it just freaked me out. It was, for some reason, I was lying on our futon. We lived in a trailer in Tennessee, 2 big dogs, and Al, the biggest one, he's always scratches on the door to come in. So I'm kind of in a half sleep. That's the reason I'm out there, I guess, because I can't sleep much. I'm just half asleep. So I get up, walk over, let him in. I see him walk in and watch him walk in. There's a double door. Close the doors, lie back down. Next thing you know, I hear Al barking and running off of our back deck. Now that was like a time slip. That was a time slip, or it was a combination time slip timeline shift. You know, so I've had a number of those. I've had them here too. It all began in earnest in Tennessee, and as far as having things come to me, shown to me in my dreams, I've seen numerous types of things. A lot of flooding dreams. I can fly. It took me. Have always been able to fly in my dreams, but I always had trouble taking off and getting up there. You know, it sounds funny.
Actually,
I
just to tell you, that's the same with me. I haven't dreamed it in a while, but I used to dream of flying all the time. Let me tell you something. I frickin' love flying. It is awesome.
Oh yeah.
But sometimes it is when you're trying to take off and it's a struggle just to like raise up off the ground.
Yes. Well, guess what? Recently, I just got it. I just figured it out. I was able to go right up, no problem. I'm like, oh my God, I got it now. You know, so, but anyway, something wild that happened. I've been seeing UFOs like forever, since I was in my early teens, you know, and we actually, when we were in West Virginia, saw like a flotilla of them. It was at least 40 of them. And no doubt whatsoever, what they were. Well, anyway, I started seeing this one particular type when we moved to Tennessee, and it flashed red, yellow, green, blue, red, yellow, green, blue. I think that's it. And it kept flashing those colors. I couldn't see the shape of it or anything. Anyway, for about 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks, every night before I went to sleep, I would I would like to see what the ships look like up close, and I would like to see what the occupants look like. So I'm in what you would call a half sleep, like a twilight sleep. You're almost asleep, but you're not quite. And I am startled awake by the ship. It's right in front of me. It's big, and it's shaped like it has 4 nodules, like it would be in a cross, but each tip of the nodule, each end of the nodule touches each other. So it's one whole thing, like it'd be a circle with 4 nodules on it. And I have a picture of it on my page. And I was like, whoa, that I was like freaky, right? So I lay back down, get into that same kind of half sleep, and I'm startled awake again by one of the beings. It was a female. She looked pretty much like us. It was really the things that stood out is she had a thin jawline. I could see her from just below her neck up, like in an oval picture frame. And her hair was the color, like if someone tried to dye their hair blonde and it went bad and it came out yellow. And that's what it looked like. It looked like yellow or golden. And then her eyes were probably the most beautiful blue I've ever seen. I mean, just startling, and slightly bigger than ours. Not bigger that you would, if you passed her by, you would think that she's weird looking. They were just slightly bigger. And so she basically looked like us, and she had this little smirk on her face, on her mouth, like well, there you go. All right, so I see them almost on any given clear night, those ships. They're all over the skies. And from what I gathered from this gentleman, that they are based on the backside of the moon, and they're Palladian.
Now I have to ask the guy question. Was she hot?
You know what? I must admit, Mark, she was.
Okay, well, there you go. That's just something that I'm sure our listeners would want to know, for the sake of research here, right? Yeah, of course.
Yes. Yeah. You want to have all the details in place. So anyway, I've seen, like, I grew up in there was the Martin Marietta Airport, and the Civil Air Patrol and the Coast Guard all came out of that one area, and they all flew. And then I had BWI, Baltimore Washington International Airport. So I grew up in Baltimore County. And then not very far from that, you had a couple airports that are in DC. So I saw planes all the time. So I clearly knew if it wasn't a plane, Well, me and a friend of mine happened to be outside, and we see this formation of either 5 or 6 of them. I can't remember, but we looking at them and we're like, look at that. And then all of a sudden they zoom. I mean, you couldn't even see them move, but you could see somewhat of a movement. You could see a trail, I guess. And they're over on the completely opposite side of the sky in the same formation. That was my first UFO encounter. But I've not been shown a lot of things because I think the view on it is that I know a lot of things, so I don't need to be shown them. I've never been abducted. I know I haven't. So but I don't need to be. I just no, you know.
See, I beg to be abducted. It's like, get me off of this rock, please. It's going to hell. I want to move to a better neighborhood.
And I beg for him to be abducted too.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I tell you to tell your buddies, let them know, you know, at least let me have a vacation or some sorts.
Okay.
That would be nice. That would be, well, I've been asking for a long while now, but I think, you know, timing is everything. I've been asking to go aboard. I'd like to go aboard one of their ships, you know, so whether they're going to take me up on it or not, I don't know. But there's been a number of times that when I've seen them and I might have an inkling of uncertainty that it is one, pretty sure it is, so I'll ask them to move for me, and they will. They'll move back and forth. They basically want to stay where they are, but they move back and forth a little bit. They might go up and down and across, and then they'll come back. And
so you're saying that when you're looking into the sky, you see a star, but you get the feeling that it might be a ship.
Yeah, well, I can tell. I can really tell because that's weird. I'm getting an echo now. Anyhow, the stars, the vast majority of the stars, when you look up there, are white. They're white, and they're blinking. You know, a twinkle, twinkle, little star. You know, they're blinking some, but they're basically white. Well, these are not white, and they're flashing. And if you take just a plain pair of binoculars, you know, standard binoculars, you can see them. You know, you can see them clearer. I mean, you can definitely tell then that they are ships. And usually there'll be, I seldom see just one. I'll see 2, 3, or 4 of them. And they'll be stationed kind of in, there's just one spot when I go out on my back deck that I look to, and they're almost always there. Almost always, you know, so I think they're benevolent. I think they're benevolent, and they're watching. I mean, you know, so I'm sure you both know there's lots going on now. Lots.
Gee, you think? Yeah, I know. Well, you know, what's the old Chinese curse? May you live in interesting times.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
you know what? Also, you mentioned you have stuff around there. Irene, you've mentioned that your valley seems to be a highway for them.
Yeah, it's UFO highway out there.
Wow.
The Grandareth Valley in Wales.
I keep trying to tell her,
You
go out there
on a
with...
clear night, and it's like you just see them going across the sky.
I try to get her to go out and start filming them, and she can't be bored. She'd rather go in and watch her soaps.
I have filmed them in the past, and like I said before, you know, I had a friend come to stay, and I locked her out there with a camera and told her she wasn't coming in until she'd got something. So she was out there for 2 hours with the door locked in the middle of November. I did give her a chair and a blanket and a glass of wine.
I was going to say, not a hot cuppa.
There you go.
I am wicked. I am really wicked. But no, yeah, I filmed stuff out there before, but you know, over the years of seeing it, it gets old hat, doesn't it?
Hello.
No, it's very high.
Hello,
up in
your
the
partner
sky
here.
and-
Your partner here in the U.S. who would like to view that footage. Hello.
Well, okay, I'll see if I can find some. I have to go onto my old computer. There's some on there, I think.
She can never be bothered with my interests. Considering I've never seen a UFO. Well, I've never seen a ghost. I always complain about this. I've never seen a UFO. Now, I've seen some strange things, but not UFOs per se.
Yeah, I know, but to me, Mark, you know, I see so much of it. It is old hat. Let's face it. You know, you go out there, you see a UFO. You go out there, you see some sort of shimmering being wandering around on the bloody patio. You know,
just another day
don't
at Irene's
take any
house.
Notice. Yeah, you just don't take any notice. My husband gets a bit excited when I point them out. Say, "Oh, look, there's a UFO up there." He gets a bit excited because he was like you, Mark. He hadn't seen anything for a long, you know, and then one weekend he was down here, and I told him it's UFO highway out there, and it was a lovely clear night. I said, just go out there and stand, you'll see them. And he couldn't believe it. He really couldn't believe it. He got really excited, and I just made a cup of tea.
See, I think they purposely hide from me because I go out and I do a lot of sky watching. I've gone to places, even when a couple of weeks back when I went to the UFO watchtower out in the San Luis Valley, and I don't see anything, as typical of me. But then yet at the same time, like I've seen them in my dreams, which is really odd. I've seen a lot of them in my dreams. And the dreams, of course, always seem to have a mystical quality to the experience. So whether it's something happening on the astral, I honestly don't know. But in waking life, now, the closest I came to seeing something, which I mentioned in a previous show a couple weeks back, when I was at that UFO watchtower, was when I was looking at the sky the one night. The two things happened. I looked up into the sky. We were watching, and it was cloud cover, and I was watching one part of the clouds, and I just saw all of a sudden the outline image of a gray alien face just appear. And it was like superimposed over the cloud. It wasn't like the cloud making shapes like elephants or Indians or whatever. It was just...
Yeah.
It was just a superimposed outline of a face that lasted for about 5 seconds. But the outline was crystal clear. It wasn't my imagination. It was so sharp it couldn't have been my imagination. And then it vanished. Nobody else with me saw it. And then about an hour and a half later, I was sitting out by myself, sky watching. Everybody else had gone to bed. It's dark. There's no lights out anywhere because we're in the middle of nowhere camping. And I just happened to turn to look at the other part of the sky, and I saw that bright light literally 20 feet away from me shoot towards the ground, like that in a downward arc. But it was just the next campsite over from me. It was not in the sky. And I saw it straight on, even though it lasted less than half a second. It went so quickly, but I saw it straight on. It wasn't out of the corner of my eye. It wasn't an optical illusion. It was there. It wasn't a UFO. I can't explain what the hell it was. It was some kind of energy burst.
I got to tell you boys something. I really have.
Here it comes.
When I was flying out, sugar. When I was flying out to the south of Italy, right, and the airplane was way above all the fluffy clouds and everything, and it was just like, I don't know, we call it cotton wool over here. I don't know what you call it. It all looked like this cotton wool. And we were flying we were above the clouds, and above us was blue skies. So it was all nice and white. It made you feel like jumping out the airplane and jumping into it. But I saw several times, because I was sitting on the window seat, I saw several times little black objects off in the distance, but they were not planes. They were moving above the clouds, little dark objects, way off, miles off in the distance. You could see them. And one particular one that I watched as it went across the top of these clouds. Now, it was going forward, but it was kind of blowing something out from the front of it. Now, you'd think if it was some sort of exhaust, it would blow out from the back. But no, it was kind of parting everything, blowing the air. You could see the air movement as it was going. And it was coming from whatever it was coming from the front of the vehicle. And it was a lot, I don't know, the air or whatever was moving by blowing it was a lot longer than the actual vehicle itself. Now, work that one out.
That's pretty wild.
That's interesting. I mean, it could be maybe you saw what also helps them move so quickly in the atmosphere, because with our modern physics...
Yeah, but you'd think... I got feedback. You would think, right, that it would come from the rear of the object as it was going forward, but it wasn't. It was coming out of the front of the object as it was going forward. Like it was blowing away the the atmosphere or blowing away air or something.
Well, what I was trying to say is that when objects move through air, it creates friction, and in some cases can overheat. That's why, like, asteroids and meteorites burn up in the atmosphere. They're coming in too fast at an angle where the air friction would just burn them up. These UFOs seem to move at such high speeds, and yet there's no air resistance. It doesn't seem to affect them. Maybe what you're seeing is part of what they're able to do to part the air in front of them to move at these greater speeds without having to encounter the friction with the atmosphere that would normally burn them up. That's just an idea. I mean, I have no idea, but I'm just guessing.
Yeah. Well, I thought it was pretty amazing.
Kind of like in Star Trek, where they have a deflector beam, shoots out to deflect anything that would be in front of the ship as it's going at high speeds.
Mm. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. I mean, who knows? Because I would think that there's multiple forms of propulsion and expulsion, that's going on in these ships, so anything could be possible. I mean, I've seen them move really fast, and I've seen them move that flotilla I was telling you about. I don't know if they did this by intent, because it was me, my wife, my grandson, my sister, and her boyfriend. We were all looking at these, and two of them, they were going straight at each other, past each other, and right after they passed each other, they did a loop. Like they were showing us, yes, we are UFOs, and because it certainly wasn't a plane doing it, because it was just a little loop at the end that each of them had done, and I think it was over 40 of them, but it's really wild. And I think what has really catapulted me into this whole field is Andy's paper, The Discovery of Life on Mars. I mean, I think everyone needs to read it. It's such an important paper, that unfortunately National Geographic refused to print.
So you actually believe that Mars is either inhabited or was inhabited then, Lewis? Yes.
I believe it's always been inhabited. It's always been inhabited, and it is inhabited now. What happened was, Andy defines 5 different humanoid species. One, Homo Martis terrae, or Earthman on Mars. The other one, Homo Martis Martis, or Martian man on Mars. The Homo Martis terrae, they are the descendants of colonists that were left behind after the catastrophe of 11,500 BCE. So what happened was, basically, that was the time of Noah's flood, and there's a lot of speculation as to what happened, but Andy and I are on the same page with this, and others are too. There was an explosion of the Vela supernova, and the debris came into our solar system. It actually pummeled our solar system. It just about destroyed Mars, and at the same time that it was pummeling Mars, there were massive wars going on all over the planet's surface. And William Whitecrow was actually there. So he time traveled back to that time with a group of people. Yeah. He was there to protect them. So anyway, that same event is what caused our flood here. So
something I've always wondered about, is that also the same event that destroyed, what's the name of the planet? Marduk? Marduk, yeah, between Mars and Jupiter.
No, that was actually destroyed by a I can't remember the alien race, but I want to say it's the Dracos, but I'm not positive about that. I wouldn't swear to that, but I know that there was actually destroyed, like, like the Death Star can destroy a planet, So it was actually destroyed, and should be there. And there's all kinds of talk about it, and Anunnaki history and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of people that are totally absorbed into that, like the Janet and Sasha Lesson and Billy Carson. They're heavily into it. And regarding Mars, let me get back to there's also Homo Mardis extraterrestrials. What that is that's the ones that look like the ET Greys. Now, I've seen a number of them, but the main one I call the Hammer Man. He is actually working. He's got a hammer in his hand. He's working a festival on Mars, which was part of my presentation and one of my favorite finds. And so they've been generally they're shorter than Earthlings.
Yeah.
And then you have Homo Mardis de minimis, which are tiny man on Mars. They're very, very small. They can be a quarter inch to an inch in height, or 6 inches or 12 inches. And their faces, I found a lot of humanoids with faces that are cartoonish.
Mm-hmm.
I found a woman who I call her the duck-billed lady. And it looks like she's serving a platter of food. She's standing there in a dress that has frills on it, and frills and puffy sleeves and frills around the sleeves, but her face is like a duck. She's got a bill of a duck, So it's like Charles Schultz and Dr. Seuss got their inspiration from these people. And then there's Homo Mardis Sasquatchus, which is Bigfoot man on Mars. So there are Sasquatch on Mars like they are here on Earth. So if it wasn't for getting into this paper, I wouldn't have probably went any farther than. I mean, it's kind of meant to be, I guess. I guess it was kind of meant to be. So and two, if I may, there's two other books that, if someone really wants to grasp, get a good picture of Mars, the one, of course, is Andy's paper, and then Cydonia, the Secret Chronicles of Mars, that was written by David E. Flynn, and the Mars Mystery by Graham Hancock, which you probably both know.
Mm-hmm.
Probably both know. So. But you can take
Lewis,
yes.
Sorry, Lewis. I don't know an awful lot about Mars. What's the makeup of Mars? Is it mainly sandstone?
Well,
those mountains and everything, they look like sandstone, or maybe it's just because of the color.
It's like the same. It's like what Earth is made out of. Okay, except where Andy went, he went to the equatorial regions.
Yeah.
And he didn't have to have a breathing device. So you can go dressed in casual wear with boots or tennis shoes on, whatever you want to go, and you can breathe on the surface of Mars. Now,
so there is oxygen there.
Yes.
Well, sorry to interrupt, but this is something that I really wanted to ask you, because, the one thing that NASA and our government and science always tries to tell us is there's no oxygen on Mars. The atmosphere is so thin that, your blood would boil, that the radiation, there's no magnetic field, so the radiation coming from the sun would irradiate and give you cancer and you'd die. So they claim that Mars is just a hostile environment to life. Yet, with what Andy is saying and his experiences, that is not the case. I mean, is there oxygen on Mars? Is there an atmosphere thick enough for us to breathe? And is the whole idea of a no magnetic field or protection from the radiation of the sun, is that true or not?
But they've discovered water there, haven't they?
Not flowing water, just ice. But that's only from the NASA perspective. I want Lewis to tell us from his and Andy's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now this comes from more than just Andy and my research. It comes from others also. Okay, so there is flowing water on Mars. There are lakes, and you get into the northern regions, there's ice, and during the day it melts. So there there is a large population living underground on Mars, and you must have water. We all must have water. So there, the oxygen, breathing on Mars would be like breathing at about 14,000 feet here on Earth. So it's a little bit labored breathing. And then what is it when you're like when you exercise and the crap comes out of your muscles, and I can't think of the word, but anyhow,
Well, there's hypoxia.
Your legs get hypoxia. That's it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. So hypoxia will set in, and you can get tired. And Andy was in a dust storm that actually he ended up saving Bernard Mendez's life in this by carrying him on his shoulder. And like Mendez's, I think the jump room's right around there, right? So anyway, he threw him into the elevator and sent him back, and then Andy did something else and went back himself. But now the sky is blue, baby blue. Okay, and there is evidence of that. There's actually some photos that have slipped through NASA. Generally, NASA is hiding the facts. I mean, just like, why is there no video? Why aren't we seeing video from the rovers?
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense.
Why, if there's nothing significant up there, are they spending billions of dollars on sending up rovers and satellites and everything else?
Actually, what it is it's a cover up. Okay, so it's a facade. So they're covering up the fact that we have a super space, a secret space program, and that billions of dollars have been spent on this program, and we have ships that not only can travel to Mars in 20 minutes, but carry 300 people on that ship. And we've been traveling throughout not only our solar system, but throughout the galaxy, and more likely than not into other galaxies. So we're just being lied to. And I think a lot of the findings that have been made are some may be intentional by people inside who want it to be seen. Other stuff that we're finding is just by shoddy work being done by the NASA employees. It's just like some people can, how some people just consider their job a job.
Yeah.
Well, with this whole, they do spend, NASA just seems to be a big smokescreen. And, especially in the last presidential administration where NASA was just completely gutted to the point where we send up an occasional probe and we have to hitch a ride to the space station with the Russians, who we supposedly hate, according to them. It's all this stupid stuff that they're trying to hide from us and they have this whole, we're already in a Star Trek world right now. They're just keeping it away from the general public. They don't want us to know because they have too much invested in it, too many secrets going on, and they're holding on to power.
Control.
Yeah.
It's control. It's all about control. And just like the people I talked about, the Homo Martis terrorists, here they are descendants from Earth that were left behind. So what that says is that in the maritime Egyptian time, because that was the wear and tear on the Sphinx and what's around the Sphinx and the pyramids and stuff is not from erosion from sand, it's from water.
Rainwater, yes.
It used to be nothing but Yeah,
because it's
so
way older
it was water.
than what they
And,
try to tell us.
and also the
Yes.
similarities with the pyramids on Earth and the pyramids on Mars.
Right,
And
right. So
and
we
that
were going
face,
back and
what's
forth.
the face? Nefertiti, oh, I can't
Nefertiti.
pronounce it.
Neferatu.
Not
Yeah.
Neferatu, yeah.
Nefertiti. Like, in the words of
Yeah,
Nefertiti,
that suggests
That's
an
it.
Earth
That's it.
Earth
That's it.
connection, doesn't it?
it does. Well,
Yes, yes.
they had that famous from the Viking landers. They had the famous picture of the face on Mars, and then they came back out in the 90s with new, supposedly higher resolution images, making it look like it's nothing like a mountain range, and so they dismiss it. But then when you take a look at the one thing they didn't fix is the fact that the outline of the thing is perfectly symmetrical. The curve
Right.
of the face is insanely artificial. They didn't try to fix that. They just superimposed some craggly mountains on it to say, see, it's not a face. Yeah, well, what about the outline of the damn thing? It looks like somebody drew it.
Right. Yep. Exactly. That's in the Cydonia region. And then, you have to give kudos to Richard Hoagland, who did the work with Mike Barr, I believe it is, and they did all of the math and measurements, and if you can literally take the Cydonia area and overlay it over the area on Earth, so the Cydonia area on Mars laid over, and it matches up perfectly. So
Matches up with where?
of course,
Egypt? Egypt or another location?
Yes. Egypt, where the Sphinx is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it matches up with it. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So yeah, they're holding so much back. It's really, it's insanity. It's really criminal negligence. It's criminal.
Yeah, well,
really
it's not
is,
negligence.
so-
It's done on purpose. It's just criminal to
Yeah,
keep an
yes.
entire civilization in the dark so that a few people
Yes.
can benefit from it.
Exactly. So that's why that is clearly, to me, one of the reasons I stand behind Andy for president so strongly, because I know when he gets in there that it's all coming out.
Well,
He's not going to be light-footed.
but here's the thing. You and I have debated this a little bit before, offline. And I'm just going to throw this
Sure.
out there. I know Andy, he ran for president this last election, and he claims in part of his time travel experiences that, he actually saw himself as being president in the future. But
Yes.
let me use Trump as a prime example. Okay, here's Trump who just got in. Whether you love him or hate him, think he's the devil or whatnot, doesn't really matter. Here's this outsider.
Right.
He's an outsider who's coming in and trying to push his agenda. And both sides, even though he ran as a Republican, he ain't a Republican. And the Republicans know that. They can't control him. So you have the left and the right all fighting against him to prevent him from getting anything done. Now, again, he's trying to work on the country from a business aspect. Now, let's look at the disclosure or UFO and secret space program. There's a lot of evidence out there. Dr. Stephen Greer has mentioned this before, and other researchers, about how the presidents, when they get in, they're just a temporary figurehead who are going to go away. They don't have access, or they're not privy to the information that is going on within our government in these secret programs. Jimmy Carter, when he came in, and he went to then head of the CIA, George Herbert Walker Bush, the senior, who would be would soon be president of the U.S. after Reagan, but he was in charge of the CIA at the time. And when Carter, who had seen UFOs, who had promised he was going to try to do something with disclosure, he went to Bush to try to get information. He was basically bitch slapped and told him, you don't have a need to know. And the president is shut out of these programs. They don't have, in fact, a lot of the military, most of the people, these things are so black, they're shut out of them. And if somebody were to try to come in and upset the apple cart and try to expose all those things, I see that person getting killed really quick because they're never, ever going to let it come to light.
Well, I understand exactly where you're coming from. But in the meantime, what I believe is before Andy becomes president, that there is going to be a lot coming out. This is what I think is going to happen. It's going to be a process. He's going to get more people coming out that can corroborate his story, and there's going to be more exposure somehow, some way that comes out to it's got to come out to the general population. I mean, there's the people that I'm associated with on Facebook, of course, they're because of what he has told me, and we have spoken a lot, and because I've actually listened to I'd say 100 of his interviews, and I know it's just, even every time I pick up something a little bit different, I pick up a little more, so what I believe about Trump is he is going to be, regardless, like you said, what anyone thinks of him, he is going to be the transition president. He's a mover and shaker, so I think he's going to open up the door for someone like Andy.
Well, that's if they don't kill him first, which my fear is one way or another, whether they come up with BS charges for impeachment or they just assassinate him. My fear is that by the end of the year, he'll be gone. And then they'll have one of their traditional establishment flunkies like Pence in, and, things will stay status quo for, just like what would happen if Hillary would have gotten in. There would be no change. But that's my cynical point of view of the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I have like I told you early on, that I am and always have been an eternal optimist. It's really strange. My dad always would say, "Oh, it'll be fine. Oh, it'll be fine," And my mother told me that she told me this when I was a young teen. She said, "You are just like your father. You fall into crap and come up smelling like a rose." And do you know, and it happens to me all the time. So I'm in for the long haul with Andy. So we're currently working on the plan.
Well, what? I will say this. I hope Andy gets in for that reason, and the fact that he's going to bring teleportation to all Americans, because let's face it, the airline industry sucks. It can't get any worse. And if you can make it obsolete by teleporting from one area to another, that would be ideal and cut down on so much. But, that's, again, one of those things that they are holding secret.
Yeah, and it's a shame because it's been around for so long. I mean, it's been around since the late 60s. I know that at least since the late 60s, because one of the things that Major Ed Dames told the jump room participants when he was training them, and that was in 1980, he said out of the let me see if I get this right. I think it's out of the 70,000. Somewhere, don't mark my words on these numbers, but out of the 70,000 people we've sent thus far to Mars, only 9,000 have survived, something like that. And so they had been sending them for years before the jump room program. So they were already doing that. And we first got to Mars in 1964. We first landed on Mars before everybody says we landed on the moon in 69. I don't believe that one bit. I believe we landed on the moon before that. I mean, why would we go to Mars before the moon? That doesn't make any sense. So and that's how I deal. I try to break it down, make it simple, and make it make sense.
With the let me talk, and I know you said don't take those numbers exactly, but it sounds like a higher level of people who went through those jumps died. Was it because of the jump itself was killing them, or they were going into a more hostile environment?
No, very hostile environment. I mean, Andy saw 2 of his comrades basically bitten in half by a dinosaur-like creature, and Andy describes it as he said, imagine a velociraptor with a T-Rex head. And they don't go, it's not like in the movies to go around and just kill everybody in sight. They're just out to eat, so, and they were trained how to try to avoid them, and you couldn't use they had stun guns, but you couldn't use it on them because you just
screw that. Give me a frickin' bazooka. If I'm aiming something at that dinosaur, I want it to go bluey,
Oh yeah.
I want to see that pink mist just blast out into the atmosphere before one of those things get a hold of me.
Yeah. So it's harsh living. The oxygen content is lower. Like the ones that were left over from the colonies that were going up there from the Egyptian times. Andy met a couple of those with his dad at a airport, and I think it was 2 of them, and they're more barrel chested, so they have developed over the years to have a larger lung capacity, I would imagine, so they can survive better in that lower atmosphere, And then speaking of that, if NASA was right, and the atmospheric pressure is 8 millibars, which is what they claim, then in order for a parachute to have, William Stillings came up with
exactly. I've heard this before. Yes. Continue.
Yeah, in order to, the parachute would have had to been the size of the continental United States. So why use a parachute? So they're lying.
Well, yeah, of course. Not only are they lying about that, but when you see these dust storms on Mars and you see the dust devil pictures coming through, you're going to tell me that some spindly little 8 millibar atmosphere is going to support wind velocities of that magnitude and carrying the amount of material these things carry when there's barely any atmosphere there? I don't buy it for a second. And you're right. The parachutes that they're landing on Mars are comparable to what they use here on Earth. And if the atmosphere was so thin, they wouldn't work. It's just physically impossible, yet they expect everybody to believe this.
Yes. Well, hey, I mean, I was researching before this happened, but when 9/11 happened, that was what I call my great awakening, because I knew instantly when I saw a tower fall that was a lie, that it did not go down in any way, shape, or form. There's no way that those planes took down, if there were planes at all that hit, because Andy has talked about this before, that when we invaded Iraq, the people saw 1,000 tanks coming towards them, but 900 of them were holograms.
Well, even Irene and I talked about, we had looked at some of the footage of the airplanes. Irene, do you remember this? We were looking at the airplanes that hit the towers, and they don't look right, and there seems to be something on the bottom of the planes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we're talking a form of holographic technology then.
Yes. And of course, it's not that far a stretch when you really think about the fact that we live in a holographic universe. Michael Talbot wrote the book The Holographic Universe, and it's outstanding, and that's how it is. That's how it is. It's really strange. I've thought about this a while ago, and it made me like really kind of wake up to it. I'm talking about my body. Well, who is the my? The my is the spiritual being that's inside it. This is my finger. Who's the my? So when you think that we live in a holographic universe, it's not a far stretch to understand that they have figured a way to make like the holodeck that was on Star Trek, where you could experience what seemed to be real.
So if this is a holographic universe and everything around us is holographic, including our own bodies, is there a way to like upgrade the program so I could upgrade this body to one a little bit more like Ryan Gosling or something?
That's good. That would be nice. I don't know of a way personally. I mean, I'd try to help you out if I could.
Sell some upgrades, folks.
That's going to take a miracle, isn't it?
Yeah, for me especially. But I've heard that that before, and they're starting to show. I've seen some videos online which I take issue with. I haven't seen anything that looks to me like it wasn't something done CGI later in the computer, in terms of holographic technology that they're supposedly coming out with, slowly introducing to the public. But, if you get these types of holograms, I mean, I actually believe when we talked earlier about UFOs, the UFOs incorporate holograms masking their true appearance all the time, whether it's clouds or morphing shapes or even looking like an airplane. People say they see a UFO and then it turns into an airplane with the jet sound and everything, but that's really a hologram.
Yes, sure. If I can just kind of change directions here a little bit, if you don't mind.
No, go. We got 20 minutes. We got 20 minutes left, so fire away.
Okay, I wanted to talk about one case in particular that I'm working on of someone that went through a timeline shift. Actually, she was literally moved. Her name is Kathleen. So I got permission to use her first name, and the reason I wanted to mention it was that she's looking for someone to help that can help her, but I don't think it's going to be possible for them to help her. It's my personal opinion, but I've been working with her for about 8 or 9 months now, and she did something that a Rockefeller did not like, and either he or who he knew did that to her. She was removed from all other timelines and moved to this one. On the other timeline, her family is now very rich. I think it was like hush money, right? On this timeline, and he has Rockefeller has basically made them hate her. She was able to actually communicate with them through this gentleman for a while, and but the people in this timeline, her family on this timeline, they're like living like most people. They're living week to week, got a few extra bucks, but that's about it. She just went to her nephew's wedding. Well, on the other timeline, has been married for 10 years. So she is beside herself. She just can't.
Well, why don't you tell us? Why don't you start from the beginning of her story on what?
Wait a minute, Lewis. So she herself from this timeline has gone to the other timeline, and she's come over to this timeline. Is that correct?
Yeah, she's from the other timeline. And
so
she was
whoever was on this timeline, her double or doppelganger or whatever, has now gone to the other timeline.
No, it was no, because okay, here's how it is. our main essence is elsewhere.
Yeah.
I happen to know where mine is. Mine's in the Taygeta star system on the planet Dakota, like the Dakota Indians, Dakota, North Dakota,
Yeah, the Dakota
And
Lakota,
so,
yes.
right. Okay. So my main spiritual essence is there. But let's say I'm on 100 timelines. There's 100 pieces of that spiritual essence that are on 100 timelines here on Earth, experiencing different things. So what happened to her is she was removed from her original timeline, the one that she misses, which I'm trying to get her out of that because she can't do anything about it. She's worrying about it, and why worry about something you can't do anything about? So anyway, she is now only on this timeline, only on it. And when she first was moved for about 3 months, first of all, she knew something was weird right away. She was still in the same house or apartment in New York, but something was strange, and she starts hearing these voices, and she's hearing her sibling say, "Oh, Kathleen, you would not believe it. It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful." So what I think she was hearing was she was hearing the part of that person that has the main part of their spiritual essence that is out there, So they didn't miss her. It's been a bad situation. The bottom line now is they hate her on the other timeline. She is no longer can communicate with them, and all the ones on this timeline, all of her family, love her. So but she has a difficult time communicating with them because what happens is she's always thinking about the others and who they were and how they acted. So they look at her. They still communicate with her, but they know something's not right, but they don't know what it is.
Well, going back to Irene's question is, if she was brought from one timeline to another, but obviously she has a whole life on this timeline with her family who currently loves her, then, then that means another aspect of her was already on this timeline, and she just took that body over. So what is about the essence of the person who was in that body before she was transferred over?
You were probably right. I never thought of it that way.
Because if she was born and has family and they remember her, it's not like she's just appearing out of thin air and nobody knows who she is.
Exactly. And I don't know why that hasn't crossed my mind, but that's what I meant. To be the truth.
Yeah, I know. That's what I was trying to clarify it. Let me ask you this. What did she do on the other timeline to piss off the Rockefellers so much to cause his change?
She was working on a project that involved voter fraud. Specifically, this one company that had these machines that she knew that were manipulating the voting.
Oh, is that the same company owned by George Soros?
Probably, But anyway, there was one other thing, but it was mild in my opinion. In my opinion, it was strictly because of that, and he didn't want it to go any further. And frankly, I don't think he gave one crap. So he just did it. The way I see it, after talking to her all this time, is his goal was to make her miserable, and that's what he did. She's been miserable ever since.
Wouldn't it not be easier to just pull a Seth Rich on her and just have her whacked, whether by make it look like an accident, a suicide, which seems to be so popular these days, especially among the Democrats, or, something else that's a little more permanent? Why go to all the trouble of shifting somebody to another timeline just to make them miserable? It seems like these
because that's how he is.
So basically, he's just a sick, twisted bastard who likes to watch people suffer.
That puts it very, very well. Yes, that's what I believe, and I tell her stuff like that. I said, "Isn't it? It's not what you did. It is not your fault. It's that idiot's fault. It's all him. So, and yeah, he's sick. He's a sicko, and he don't give one crap. And my guess is he's done it to others. Why not? So he's not going to give him the easy way out. He didn't want to do that. He just wanted to make him miserable.
How do you?
And he certainly is.
And naturally, I have to ask this: what are the mechanics of kicking a person out of one timeline into another? I mean, if you're simultaneously, because these are the type of questions I automatically ask, because I'm a very analytical person, is the fact that if your soul or spirit is experiencing multiple timelines automatically, like Irene, the one where you see me where I smoke and I don't smoke,
right?
Then. Like we said, somebody had to be in this timeline before she came here in the same body.
Yes.
Was it another aspect of her? Were they doing something to shift maybe her awareness from one timeline to another? And if so, are they doing this stuff with machinery?
She an experiment. They are obviously far more advanced in that timeline than we are in this one. With us, it just seems to happen occasionally.
Yes.
As a fluke.
Yes.
But obviously, they're more advanced and they've got it down to a T.
I agree, Irene. I agree. I agree, yes. I think that they are, or the other alternative is that we are that advanced also. It just has not been.
One of the other
she
lovely
says
things that they
brought out there.
Oh, that they know everything already in that timeline?
She said on that timeline, disclosure has happened.
Yeah, so they're more advanced. They're ahead of us.
Yes, they may not be technologically advanced.
So it's a timeline for future timeline.
No, actually, I think it's a timeline that's the same parallel as now. Maybe even the technology's the same. But here it's all secret. Here they keep it away from the general public.
Correct. That's my view.
Yeah, it could be that we're the opposites.
That's my view. Yeah, so she is, believe me when I tell you, she is miserable. And Andy and I and her had a conference over Skype. And Andy and I finished up, after she hung up, and he said she's telling the truth, because he could tell because of the similarities to what he experienced with timelines, So my guess is they perfected the device like the chronovisor. The chronovisor they stated that it was no longer reliable because it could not put you on a specific timeline. You didn't know which timeline you were going to go to. So like when he went back to try to see who shot Lincoln, well, he went back, I think about a half a dozen times, and twice he got up to the balcony, but it was chased away. But one time he goes and he sees the father and son selling tickets behind the ticket booth, and then one time he goes and he sees just the father, and one time he goes and he sees just the son, and he also saw this man walking in with two women, one on each arm. Then he sees him with one. And then another time he goes back and he's just walking in by himself. So different timelines. So it's same event happening. The opera, where he was shot. And then, so they wanted to find out because there's speculation that Mary Todd may have done it, his wife. And she was known to have carried a single shot Derringer in her purse. So now when Andy saw Lincoln walk in, he was really hunched over. Basically, he describes him as a skeleton with skin on it. So he was really sick. He was very sick. So now Mary Todd was in and out of institutions, so she wasn't a very stable person.
No, she was batshit crazy.
Yeah.
There's no two ways to put it. No sugarcoating it. She was batshit crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, but to give you an idea of the timeline issue, but perhaps now they have that fixed and they can be timeline specific with the chronovisor. Now, with the other types of time travel, they can be specific, like plasma confinement and things of that nature. So anyway, it's a really awful story. I feel really bad for her, and which is why I've been working so long with her. So for the longest time we talked daily, and I feel like she's getting better, but she still needs more help. I mean, she would love, of course, to find someone that had the ability to move her back. But
it depends on what type of technology they use. Is it something mechanical? Is it something high spiritual? I mean, super advanced, like an ET type of technology. I mean, how do you shift one person from one timeline to another that doesn't utilize the flux capacitor? And going 88 miles an hour,
I don't know. I do know that natural timeline shifts occur for multiple reasons. The natural ones, like the ones I experienced, and Jenny Randall's, who wrote Time Storms, she put out an excellent book that everyone should read. That's interested in the subject matter, because it's really good, and because there's natural portals, that move you back in time, and or ahead in time, or places where you have these timeline shifts, like I don't know if I know we don't have much time left, but the one lady that came, can't remember her name, but she wakes up in bed and her sheets are different, but then she didn't think much of it. So she goes to work, and her boss isn't the same boss she had, and
I've
she
heard this
doesn't have
story.
the same room. Have you heard that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that one was pretty out there.
She didn't even work in the same department, and there's things very similar, but there's still a lot of changes in who her boss was, her job duties, everything was different. It's very similar to this. There was the story of the guy back in the 1950s who arrived on an international flight from Japan. To Japan.
Yes.
To Tokyo, and his passport was from a country that doesn't exist. And he insisted it existed. He even showed him where the country was on a map, but it wasn't there. It was like on a portion to the northeastern part of what's France today. And he had money on him, but the money was from that country, but wasn't good. They couldn't figure it out, so they put him in a hotel room for the night with guards, so he couldn't leave and get out in the country. Well, they researched it, and then the next morning they went in, and he was gone out of the room. He never left. Yes. His luggage was gone. It's like it all vanished and shifted back to whatever timeline he came from.
Yeah, pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. I mean, that's amazing.
It's like what they also mentioned, these Mandela effects, where we have different memories of things happening, like Kirk Douglas dying back in the 90s, and yet people remember his funeral, Michael Douglas and Catherine Zeta-Jones at the funeral, and yet he's still alive today.
Yeah.
Well, I've watched the television news one day, and what happened on what I saw on the television news didn't happen till the following day. And yet I'd seen it the day before on the television screen.
Wow. That's definitely a time slip.
Yeah.
Yes.
But then I'm a funny one anyway, so I'm not even sure if I am from this time or not. I've lost track.
Or planet.
One thing I've always liked different. I've always liked different,
Yeah. Oh, me too.
All things, I just like different, and I like to explore, the truth in things. I have to be totally interested in it. It's got to be something that's really, like I did all the work on aspartame and high fructose corn syrup and fluoride, and ended up getting helping to get fluoride removed from the town of Honewell, Tennessee, when I was living there. You know, it was me and another guy brought a packet in, and fortunately, Senator Joey Hensley was an advocate for the removal, and he was there, and the city council voted unanimously to remove it.
Oh, that might be my problem then, because they put fluoride in the water here.
Oh yeah, here it's really bad, and I make sure that I use a filter. I won't drink that crap. We're actually coming up, Michael. We're coming up here on the end of the show. Now, you've spoken at some conferences. Do you have any conferences or speaking events that are coming up?
No, there is the 7th annual Mars conference that is about to begin to be planned, and I'm hoping to have that again sometime in May or June. You know, so but it's not going to be here in Mobile. It's going to be in a bigger city. You know, so we can draw people that can actually walk there, who live there. You know, it keeps their costs down, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, you know. So, because this year I flew Jana and Sasha Lesson in from Hawaii, and Thomas Mikey, he came from Denmark. Billy Carson came in, and Brett Colin Shepard, and Karen Patrick.
Okay.
And Ken Johnston, you know, so it was a really excellent conference this year. We really enjoyed it, and all of that can be found. All of those presentations can be found on Mars Moons Space TV, which is a entity that Thomas Mikey put together.
And how can
all
people?
Of our interviews.
I'm sorry, we're running short on time. How can people get in touch with you? Do you have a website or just your Facebook page? What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to?
Best is my Facebook page. I don't answer calls on my phone unless I recognize the number. So if they want to call and talk to me, they need to first friend me, message me, and my phone number, everything is on my page. I don't hide anything.
Okay.
I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid, you know, so I don't hide anything. It's all there. And then I've got bunches of albums on my page of you know, my family, of course, and all of a lot of the work that I have done in my Mars work.
Well,
so,
Lewis, thank you very much for coming on the show tonight. This has been an awesome discussion. I think we could have gone another hour at least and still had a good time with it.
Yeah, it was very good, Lewis.
I agree. Thank you very much. That was awesome. I had a blast. I can't believe 2 hours is
well,
flies by, doesn't it?
Does. Well,
Yes.
I want to thank all of our listeners for tuning in. Another edition of Paranormal UK Radio. You can hear us every Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Greenwich Mean and Eastern Time here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and simulcast also on TalkStream Live, TuneIn Radio, and of course our podcasts on Podbean, Stitcher, iTunes, and several other platforms. Well, thanks again for listening, everybody. Have a great evening. Irene, we'll catch you next week.
That's right. Okay, bye, people.
Bye-bye.